Kia ora, talofa, namaste, and welcome to the Niche Case Variety Show, where we dabble in Aotearoa sporting notes. It's just a sporting notebook from the Niche Case presented in a podcast video form. Hi to Mike, and welcome. Shout out to the Patreon, whānau. We have recorded a big old cricket podcast this morning as well. So join the Patreon, whānau, patreon.com/our niche case. That link's in the description. And we asked the question about England cricket being cooked. Went deep into black caps in county cricket, black caps in the IPL, ahead of touring England this winter, which we are keeping a close eye on as well. So Patreon, whānau, check that out. Support the niche case via Patreon as well. That's a great idea. Some stats and notes that we use in the podcast, we flesh them out in the email banger for a Monday and Friday. So shout out to that. That's via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com, and sign up to a twice weekly Kiwi Sporting email. Probably the best in the world, I'd say, with regards to Aotearoa sport. Shout out to it, sign up to it, and enjoy it. And of course, we're from the Niche Case. We're always writing about Aotearoa sport in depth. theniche-case.com. Start our podcast in the most honkadory way with a dose of mindfulness. Spark it up.
Yeah, let's spark up some biblical mindfulness today, because it was Easter weekend. And Easter weekend is Mr. Jesus's time to shine. So here's a quote directly from Mr. Jesus himself in Matthew chapter 5, verse 7, I believe is how you read them, from the King James Version, of course, because that's the good one. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy.
Show a bit of mercy, show a bit of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Fairly,
and get it back in return.
That's a run it straight version. You know, there's not a dwell on it for 5 minutes and ponder the meaning of life. That's just a run it straight up the guts. Learn and grow. Show a bit of mercy, have a bit of empathy.
Yeah, that's from, I think, the Sermon on the Hill, I believe is right, if I've got my my Gospels right. And that's part of a longer thing where he's like, blessed are the peacemakers, and blessed are the meek, and for they shall inherit the earth, or however it goes. I like that one in particular. Like, I just singled out that one because I like the cyclical thing of that. It's not like do good and something else will happen to you that is good. It's specifically like, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Like, do this thing and you'll be rewarded with other people doing the exact same thing that you've just done, you know. And it's always just good to have mercy for other people, and it's just another way of saying be compassionate, isn't it?
And be a peacemaker. Peacemakers are cool. I like peacemakers. We're here to bring the peace. Would love to. Maybe one day we'll whip up an Aotearoa gospel and we'll just share it out like a biblical text.
The sermon on One Tree Hill, or something like that.
The actual One Tree Hill will be sitting up there with some deck chairs in Auckland on top of One Tree Hill, where there's no tree, just a monument of hopefully it's a native Aotearoa Māori figure that has a nice monument on top of One Tree Hill. I hate to be a weirdo colonizer. Wildcat, let's crack into some Aotearoa sport here. Let's start off with a couple of hot takes. Interesting Sunday of sport there for the Easter delivery wildcard. Probably wasn't a lot of mercy showing. So can you bring the mercy and deliver a hot take to start our show?
Yeah, definitely needed some more mercy for me getting up at 5 o'clock to watch the Mavericks play and lose NBA basketball playoffs, and Steven Adams lose. Phoenix lost, Warriors lost. It was a rough day, that one. Needed a bit more of the old Easter resurrection. Didn't get it. But my take is that we need to lean into this Welly Knicks weirdness. This is a team that seems to either win or get thrashed. 4-0 loss against Central Coast Mariners on the weekend. Coming off a couple of wins before that, though. They've actually only drawn 3 games all season. And that's kind of it means you're going cycling between the extremes, but low-key, that's actually kind of good because, A win and a loss is actually better than 2 draws, and one's 3 points, one's 2 points, and it's that kind of like one extreme to the other that's actually keeping the Wellington Phoenix afloat right now. Like their last 10 results, from the furthest back to the most recent, go 3-1 win, 2-1 loss, 4-0 loss, 2-1 win, 3-0 win, 6-0 loss, 5-0 loss, 4-1 win, 1-0 win, and then big ceremonial homecoming on the weekend was a 4-0 loss. So it's absolutely all over the place. But when you consider like some of the stuff the team's been through this season and continues to, kind of forgive it, considering like, they didn't get a home game until the 22nd game of the season. They had to play their first 6 games with only 2 available imports. Top striker Gary Hooper made just 6 starts all season. Injury crisis all through the second half of things, which has especially been notable in midfield, which, Captain Alex Rufer going down with an ACL injury, most notably. 6 academy players have made debuts this season, like just ignoring guys like Sam Sutton and Ben Wayne, who are playing key roles as academy graduates. Like 6 new players have made debuts this season alone. Plus 3 more who could make debuts before the season is over, who have made benches throughout the season. All precedence is basically thrown out the window at this point. Like, it is team traveling uncharted team sports territory with a very young squad that's prone to inconsistencies, always going to be. Sometimes they get thrashed, but sometimes they also win. So they've had 6 defeats of 4 or more goals this season, but they've actually won the immediate next game after a 4-goal plus defeat 3 times out of 5, and we'll be hoping to make that 4 times out of 6 this weekend at Eden Park against Western Sydney Wanderers. The goal difference was wrecked weeks ago, so it actually doesn't matter at this point if they lose 1-0 or 4-0. Like, they're not going to beat a team on goal difference. That's not going to be the difference for them, so it doesn't really matter. What matters is that they can continually bounce back from big defeats and get victories, which is what they've been doing so far this season. That has been the pattern that has kept them in the playoff positions with 4 games left, despite everything. Not a time right now for explanations or theories. Pretty much just like clear your head of all preconceived notions about how seasons are supposed to work and whether teams that lose 4-0 at home should be making finals. Like, forget about all those things. Just got to lean into the weirdness over the rest of the season, because the Wellington Phoenix are 4 games out from making the finals despite everything they've had to deal with. And that's a pretty astounding achievement, to be honest. And I'm just trying to enjoy the ride and not think about the roller coaster too much.
I am going to suggest that a victory for the West Tigers is a victory for Aotearoa Rugby League, and that's what we were graced with Monday night. Pretty epic victory for the West Tigers. I had said earlier in the year that I was curious about either way the West Tigers went. If they continued to suck, then Michael Maguire can use it as a chip on the shoulder for Aotearoa Kiwis World Cup coaching. But you also want them to win a game, maybe 2, maybe 3 in a season. It would just be great if they weren't terrible every game. And they rallied in a pretty interesting Kiwi NRL matchup. So we had the victory. That was great. The footy was great. The victory was great. Victory for Michael Maguire to show us all as Kiwi Rugby League fans that the dude is working something. It's not like no one wants to play for him, that he can't do anything. Like, there's something there. There's a bit of heart, bit of mana in that Tigers team. And an epic Kiwi NRL matchup. Kim Amala was not meant to play originally. Stafford Toa was called onto the wing. But then, game time, you get Stafford Toa at centre, and he was kind of good. And Kenny Mamala on the wing, and he was pretty effectful. He was very impactful, as well. But a Kelma Tuolangi on the edge. But the Eels, the Kiwi NRL Eels, the Aotearoa Eels played their part. Maratini Okori came back for, I think, his first game this season, playing at centre, and ran the ball ridiculously hard, which, as if, like, for a big bloke who can move that fast, move fast enough to play centre, is fantastic. Isaiah Papali'i was really good as well. Hayes Perham got some game time coming off the bench, play wing as well. So good things happening there with the Eels. Good thing for the Tigers to win. Beautiful. Don't know when they'll win again, but at least for the Aotearoa World Cup campaign, a victory for the Tigers is a victory for Aotearoa Rugby League at this stage as well. So really enjoyed it. Dive into a stat here, Wildcard.
Yeah, just a little simple stat that's popped up as part of some wider research I've been doing in preparation to write about this Costa Rica football team ahead of the World Cup playoff that they're going to play against the All Whites in June. And because Costa Rica was sort of, they didn't start their qualifying campaign too well, but they went on a 7-game unbeaten streak at one point to really surge them back into the mix to claim that playoff spot, which they were very happy about to get a game against New Zealand. The stat I noticed is that they actually only averaged 37% possession across those 7 unbeaten games. And I thought that was really interesting there because that plays into some tidy vibes I'm getting from this matchup specifically, like the stylistic matchup between Costa Rica and the All Whites. So Costa Rica have a lot of like older players, very experienced, much more experienced than our team overall. We've got quite a few young players going with a couple of sort of like elder statesmen, Winston Reid, Chris Wood types holding things together. And I think like a neutral one-legged tie is obviously very much a swing in the Aotearoa team's favor as well, especially having seen some of the crowds that they get in Costa Rica. Like they were packing out stadiums. There was like mass passion and take that atmosphere out of it entirely by playing a one-legged game in Qatar, neutral territory. That's pretty beneficial as well. And then in terms of just that like styles make fights thing, like the All Whites are definitely the underdogs. But as I say, I like what I see from the matchup. If you're getting a Costa Rica team that's looking to be like experienced and sort of a little bit differential and play without possession and look to be maybe a bit more counter-attacking and like heavily structured in defense. That's the kind of team that's going to allow the All Whites to play a little bit higher up the field and to get into their like pressing game a bit more and to really like work some chances, take a few risks, knowing that they're going to be able to get the ball back. And Joe Bell absolutely thrives. So does Marco Stamenic, like thrives in being able to just post up on like halfway and win the second ball every time. Sarpreet Singh should be able to get lots of touches if we've got possession. He's the kind of guy who the more you give it to him, the more like good things will happen. Absolutely no doubt that like Costa Rica is going to be ruthlessly tough to break down. But, you know, we do have a Premier League striker at our disposal who can do his best there. And yeah, just the more I research on this Costa Rica versus All Whites game, the more I kind of like the balance of how that one might go. It's just I'm liking what I see and I'm liking what I'm reading in the tea leaves there, you know.
Interesting that one of the themes we've talked about with Aotearoa football is the requirement for more razzle-dazzle on the women's side, but adequate razzle-dazzle on the men's side right now. And that razzle-dazzle needs to be applied to this Costa Rica matchup that you're talking about. It. So it's kind of the razzle-dazzle manifested here, which is good to see. My stats here, Wildcard, are going to highlight some matters for the Aotearoa Warriors and what held them back against the Sydney Roosters. First 5 games of the season, 3 wins, 2 losses. The Warriors gathered at least 500 post-contact meters in every single game. When they dominated the Broncos, they had 700 post-contact meters. Every other game was 500 plus. Against the Roosters, they had 398 post-contact meters. So that was the first game of the season. The Warriors were below 500 post-contact meters and they were below 400 post-contact meters. There was a significant drop in their average set distance as well, obviously. 30.8 meters. Every game apart from the first game was at least 37 meters per set. First game against the Dragons, which they lost, was 33.29 meters per set. Against the Roosters, it was 30.8. So abnormal drop in post-contact meters. Less abnormal drop in the set distance. So what did the Roosters do? They kind of just won that battle of the forward pack. And if the Warriors did want to shift it to get down on Waitane-Zelezniak, the noted running psycho involved, they monstered him. Like any of the Warriors shifts where they go 2 pass and try hit an edge forward, 2 pass, hit a like winger. The Roosters, great line speed. They identified where the ball was going, monster them. And a lot of other stuff was happening in that Roosters game. Like Warriors were good, Warriors were bad, refs were, typically weird. The Roosters were good and bad. Like there was a lot of interesting stuff happening in that game but I don't think when the Warriors are running for 398 post-contact meters, that is not conducive to them winning a game against one of the better teams in the NRL. Deep in the Mangroves World Cup. What have you found in your little treasure map? Pirates of the Mangroves. That's a good one. Pirates of the Mangroves.
Yeah, Pirates of the Mangroves.
Mangrove Pirates. Mangrove Pirates.
Mangrove Pirates. I had my Mangrove Pirate map, and it seemed to be pointing towards like, ex-master spot, buried treasure, Memphis Grizzlies, NBA playoffs, everything's aligned. Just follow the map. It's all sweet as. Little bit of a hiccup in game one, though, against the Minnesota Timberwolves. And we'll ignore the sort of like the wider teams, allowing them to score 41 points or whatever it was. First quarter, Ja Morant didn't have a great game. Jaren Jackson Jr. in a lot of foul trouble. We'll ignore a lot of that stuff and just focus on Steven Adams here, because this is a major focus there, and it's not a great matchup for Steven Adams coming up against Karl-Anthony Towns. In general, I think he struggles against big men who can shoot from the perimeter, because that allows them, like, they drag him further from the rim basically, where he's less comfortable. Not too hard, therefore, to get him switched and around a screen, and then suddenly he's guarding a guard, and that's, he just can't keep up with that. Not so much the problem with Cat, though, because Cat didn't need the screens, because Cat can drive pretty well himself. Like, he was just blitzing past Steven Adams, and he actually, like, a couple of Adams's fouls, because he got himself in some foul trouble as well. Like, a couple of those fouls were specifically on Karl-Anthony Towns' drives, just like reaching a hand in, or trying to take a charge at one point. And I'm watching this being like, when does Steven Adams try to take charges? He doesn't do that normally. So it's a bit weird, and you could see there's a bit of that playoff atmosphere was maybe getting to the Grizzlies a bit, where I wonder if they were just a little bit too hyped for it almost. But Karl-Anthony Towns as a shooter, as someone who can drive, as someone who's tough enough to go with Adams in the post as well. Scored 6 of his 8 buckets for 14 out of 20 of his total 29 points, when specifically guarded by Steven Adams. Like, Adams just couldn't handle him. It's a bad matchup. It's a bad situation for him. What other solutions? I mean, they could put Jaren Jackson Jr. on Karl-Anthony Towns, which I think is probably the best thing to do. Just a matter of how you do that. Like, do you start Jackson at the 5, put Adams to the bench, or do you just have Jackson playing 4, Adams 5 as normal, but guarding the opposite guy's man, so Adams on Vanderbilt instead? Probably the best way to do it. I don't know, but you've also got Brandon Clark, who could either come in alongside Adams, or he could start instead of Adams. He was one of the few pluses for Memphis in that game. Or maybe you just say Adams keeps guarding Cat, but you just have to adjust and be a little bit better. Maybe like allow him to have the jump shot and be like, well, I'm just going to not let you drive. Or maybe just make sure you get those guards fighting around those screens and stuff, so he's not getting switched, things like that. Because I think ultimately it's a lot easier to deal with Adams getting torched in that one aspect defensively if you're also getting his like offensive production of the season. And I think that's secretly like undercover where this game got away from him more so, because he had a 12% usage rate during the regular season. He had a 1.8% usage rate in this game. So he was being used a 10th as often as he was during a normal regular season game. Only had 15 touches in total, still had 3 assists, and was the team's best screener by far. I think it was like 8 screen assists or something like that for about 17 points. So when they did involve him offensively, he was still doing the things that he's been doing. Like they're accustomed to seeing from him. They just didn't do it anywhere near enough, like only 10% as often. It didn't help as like rebounding was troubling, because I think you've had like a pretty, as you would as Minnesota coming into a game like this, you'd set up a plan to stop the league's best offensive rebounder from doing what he does. And there was, Karl-Anthony Towns was playing him real hard, physical, and you also had Vanderbilt doubling up on him. So he was really getting crowded off the boards a lot, which is going to be something he has to deal with. But yeah, overall, it sort of felt like a frantic game one where there was a bit too much energy, some poor decisions from Memphis, and that took them away from the blueprint that allowed the Timberwolves to therefore kind of assert things. And it's important to remember it's only game one, though. Like, lots can change between games and NBA playoffs. You can absolutely guarantee that Coach of the Year candidate Taylor Jenkins has a few ideas up his sleeve after watching the tape back. It's just a matter of, like, I guess the question that we're all sitting back here in this country wondering about is, like, how much do those adjustments, like, affect Steven Adams? Do we see more Steven Adams? We see him getting like filling back into his more prominent offensive role, or does it mean we see less Steven Adams because defensively it's just a terrible matchup for him? Like that's what I mean. 3 words basically. Like we shall see. Come game 2, we shall see. We'll see how that works.
What's your intuition tell you? Does he feature as much in the next game or 2 or not?
I think he probably does. I don't think they'll want to throw the script away from what worked, and I think that the plan will be, before anything else, to get back to what worked during the regular season, and that does mean involving Adams a lot more. But I do think the rope is a lot shorter now, and if they get back to something like that, and it's still, you're seeing that defensively he's more of a hassle than he is a benefit offensively, like if that's still the case, then suddenly you start to look at like shrunk minutes and maybe playing a bit more with the bench unit where you're not balancing the time with Towns, like playing when Towns isn't on the floor and things like that. The issue I think they also have is that if they do put Jackson Jr. on Towns, is Jackson Jr. is an aggressive defender, goes to shot blocks, gets a lot of fouls. They can't afford to just throw someone like Adams away because they're going to be in foul trouble from all of these dudes having to guard someone like that. So it's just a matter of the balance in the rotation. I think for game 2 and 3, I think we'll still see them trying to reassert what they did well in the regular season. And that does mean a lot more Steven Adams with the ball in his hands, hopefully.
Good. Mahi. I'm going into the domestic cricket. Come across a domestic cricket pirate ship in the mangroves, and as the mangrove pirates we have to explore. A couple of nods been given out to the domestic cricket Plunket Shield landscape in recent days. Had the Plunket Shield All-Stars, had the Fresh and Funky lads. So I'm going to combine the two, and I'm going to give a nod, a little salute, hat tip, a big cheer to the big Donny, Tom Bruce, who finished first in runs and went large. 800 runs, 13 innings, 7 not out, which gave him an average of 143. And if you look at his last couple of knocks there, just to wind up the summer for Tom Bruce, 90 not out, 208 not out, 204 not out. The only yeah, all right, bro, but thing is that Tom Bruce played the 90 not out and the 204 not out were both at Napier, and 3 of his last 4 games were in Napier. But he still dominated. And that's 3 50-plus scores in the second stanza. And I do want to be conscious of recency bias with some of these nods and some of these salutes. So 3 50-plus scores in the last 4 games, but he had 6 50-plus scores overall. So he did hit his 2 centuries, which were both double bangers in the last 3 games, but he also had 3 50-plus scores in the first stanza. So that's just a good split across the 2 stanzas of Plunket Shield cricket. So Big Donny Tom Bruce, and the freshie is Simon Keene. Fresh on the scene, and hooches are screaming for some Plunket Shield seamen. How about that? Seam bowling, seaming. Seam bowling,
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Crikey Jack. It's good when you're freestyling, but then you realize like what you said was a bit weird. Simon Keene, 25 wickets in 5 games. This is a lot of recency bias because Auckland didn't play a first stanza game. They only played in the second stanza, but how can you overlook Simon Keene? 25 wickets, average of 14, RP of 2.8. He was the only bowler. 4 bowlers took over 25 wickets. Simon Keene was the only bowler to do it in less than 150 overs, 127.1 overs, which was the least overs. Let me go down here. Ben Sears, 104 overs for 18 wickets is the next best. But Simon Keene, 25 wickets, 127 overs, first 5 games of his first-class career as well. Just steered Auckland to a Plunket Shield championship. Like if Simon Keene's not there, Auckland's next best bowler is Will Somerville, and then it's Louis Delport. So they're both spinners. So without Simon Keene, not sure if Auckland are competing as well, which is a fairly decent effort in your first 5 games, but interested to see how that pans out. So big Donny Tom Bruce and the freshie Simon Keene. Also shout out to the All-Stars and the entire Fresh and Funky group as well. Check those out. Question time. You referred to the Wellington Phoenix, the phase that they've been going through this season. Hard losses and wins. So bit of good, bit of bad. Which, like, the volatility there feels very Warriors-esque, where the extremities are explored, and it's like you're feeling great one week and then you're less great the other week. I don't think the Wellington Phoenix are cursed though, so let's make that clear. But during the stage, who has been the best Wellington Phoenix player? Including everything, the good, the bad, the good games, bad games, that stretch. Who has been the best Wellington Phoenix player in this phase?
See, this is a surprisingly hard question to answer, because guys, like, when they win, guys like, Gail Sandoval's normally having a big impactful game and things like that. And Nick Pennington's had a couple really nice performances, but also it feels like when they lose, those guys have not played well at all. So, and then you've got someone like Sam Sutton, who was in really good form, but hasn't played that often recently because he had a bout of COVID that he's hopefully will have recovered for in time for the game at Eden Park on the weekend. I'm assuming the timelines work out that way. So, it's tricky to find someone who was consistent through a team being completely inconsistent. But I reckon if you took Scott Wooden out of that team, you dry up a lot of those wins. And I know he's been a defender in a team that's had like 6-0 and 5-0 and 4-0 losses recently, but I also feel like he's tying that team together in a very important way. Ollie Sale would also have a candidacy as well for this thing. So maybe it should be a 1A, 1B, because they've, to be fair, a lot of those big defeats have been late in games where they've been run over. Like, it's been close up to about an hour, and then because they've got so many injuries and unavailable players, they don't have the bench guys to be able to turn to change the course of games. They get tired because they've just been doing this like midweek weekend thing over and over and over. And so like late games have just been sort of teams have run away with them. It's not like they've been dominated from minute 1 till 90 through a lot of these performances. Even on the weekend, really close game up until they dominated the first 25 odd minutes until they conceded, and it was pretty close up until the second goal about an hour in for Central Coast, and then they ran away with it. So that's just been a pattern of these defeats. And I think someone like Scott Wooden as just an input at the back, we saw what they were like at the start of the season without someone in that kind of role. We saw the same thing last season where it was like this year was split in between. Didn't have Stephen Taylor, did have Stephen Taylor. Way better in that second half of the season. Not a coincidence. Like a young team, a lot of converted options at the back as well. Utility players and guys who were, a midfielder by trade playing left back and things like that. They needed someone like Scott Wooden. And I think if you took him out of the team, even though it looks weird to pick a centre back, as I say, with a team that's getting thrashed every second week, if you took him out of that team, things would look very different. And I don't think they'd be competing for a playoff spot. He's been like a calming presence in a team that absolutely has been screaming for something exactly like that. And if you're out there screaming, that's probably a good example that you do need a calming presence just in itself. So yeah, him bringing that import quality leadership and experience to the back line is absolutely essential. And I'd shout out to Ollie Sale as well. He's had a couple during that spell, just a couple of unbelievably good performances as well. So he's been great too. Question back your direction. So not a lot of people sort of certainly not in the mainstream coverage that the White Ferns got leading into the Cricket World Cup. Not a lot of people went to the depth that you did, first of all, in the coverage, and also not a lot of people seem to actually look at the results and realize the trajectory that the team was on, and that maybe that World Cup performance was actually entirely within character. But let's assume that people have noticed now because they've been reading the niche cache, and that someone from head honcho White Ferns New Zealand Cricket Board or whatever, someone who knows and has some power, gets in touch and gives you a little email or something and says, well, just like off the record here, what's the first suggestion that you would give us to turn this White Ferns team around? What's the one bit of advice, overwhelming, that you would give the White Ferns to fix things? What is that bit of advice?
It might be to sign up to the email banger, because the Monday email had the too many dicks on the dance floor reference. And I think a lot of the problems with women's sport in New Zealand is too many dicks on the dance floor. There's just too many blokes involved who, I think we've got a nice track record that in these situations, there are too many blokes involved. So that's probably the one place I'd direct them, just have a look. And then definitely watch more Fly of the Conchords videos on YouTube. But they might need an explanation as well, which I gave in the email. Otherwise, I think a big thing, and this is a good thing for all sports teams, no matter what team you're following, you're coaching, you're looking after, what level it is, select the best players. That is usually the best thing. Like especially if you're struggling for depth and you've got concerns about some of the talent in compared to other nations. To win, you need your best players on the park, and your own ego, your own political bullshit, all that stuff holds you back from winning, because that holds you back from selecting the best players. And I think the White Ferns and teams that aren't successful, they get a bit cute and they get a bit like, we know more than you, probably because we're all blokes. We know more than you, so we're going to do this weird idea that I know. Whereas like sometimes, or in this specific situation, I'd say a lot of the best cricketers weren't playing for the White Ferns. So that's gonna hinder your chances of victory, and it just makes things weird. That's where you get the bad juju. That's where you get the bad vibes. You get the red flags that then compound into other matters. If you're messing with the sports gods by not selecting the right, like the best players, you're getting offside with old Papatua Nuku and Ranganui. That's not a good idea. You're going to get rained on. You're going to get you're going to get reminded very quickly that the big old universe, and in this case, the cricketing deities are running the show. And you got to play ball, and your weird decisions, your overcomplications, your cuteness, that just messes with the juju, So just keep it simple, select the best players, and that goes for all levels, White Ferns as well as the lower levels. Any talent camps, contracts, like just go with the best players, as opposed to, because then you open up space for the random potential X Factor player. If you're generally operating from the best players are here and are recognized, it's not like the whole group is random potential X Factor players. That's not reliable, and that's not conducive to winning. So probably a bit of that, and then just later bolt.
Yeah, nice and thorough email back there. I think was, you better be checking the inbox there, because that one might come.
It's probably better if you if we instigate a bit and you say like, oh, we got the White Ferns on the phone, I'll just pass them over to you. Like, go next time, do that, and we'll do a proper phone call comedy routine. That won't be as good as Fly to the Conchords. Let's get into musical jam here, Wildcard. I'm going to shout out one track, bit of a random track this time. This is a winner. This isn't a random potential X Factor musical selection. This is a proven winner. Don't know when it was from, but it was from a long time ago. Dr. Buzzard's original Savannah band, Sun Showers, or Sun Shower, just single, Sun Shower. A lot of rain around in Aotearoa. Winter's coming in. The footy codes are rising. A lot of rain around. So just jam this song, Sun Shower. Just search Sun Shower, and then hopefully you'll find Dr. Buzzard as well. And it's a glorious jam where you got Wildcard.
This just must be like that time of the year or something, because it's just been like stacked with good to like straight up great albums that have been coming out recently. And like just from the last week or so of new releases, like Kurt Weill's got a new album. Great, it's awesome. Wet Leg's album, like much anticipated first album, finally come out. That one's absolutely fantastic. Like that one's superb. Vince Staples has got one. Father John Misty's got one. And then also, just to give a lone track shout out as well, Kiwi, I guess you'd call her a country artist, I suppose. Tammy Nielsen did a duet song with Willie Nelson on it, which is unbelievable. Like that's my guy. That's Willie Nelson. It's the equivalent of getting for a Kiwi country artist, that's the equivalent of getting like Michael Jordan to coach the Auckland Huskies or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it's a good solid level of basketball, but like here's the greatest of all time coming into like spread wisdom. Like that's amazing. And the song's pretty cool too. I can't remember what it's called. Behold the Stars, Beyond the Stars, something like that. Good tune, like good sweet little tune, and lovely like meaning behind it. I think Delaney Davidson also gets a co-write on it. So good times there.
Good times on the variety show. That's it. We'll be back on Thursday with a big old monster niche cast. Until then, kia kaha, stay beautiful. Cheer.